in the room and cannot wait to see who else is going to come in because there were so many people registered for tonight. So we'll see who shows up. But even if they don't come, we're going to have a good time in this space. So welcome every single person. Again, this is week 3 of the Black History journey through Black history, starting with your own journal challenge. And the focus for this week, because every single week we go through a different phase. And this week is all about the journey of a sapling and a chrysalis who starts to grow and move. As Shirley Chisholm states, you don't make progress by standing on the sidelines whimpering and complaining. You make progress by implementing ideas. And the individuals who are here on our panel tonight do just that. And one of the things that happened in Black history, actually on February 15th, 1851, is that we had some Black abolitionists invade a Boston courtroom and rescue a fugitive slave on this day in Black history. And the individuals who are coming up to speak tonight have definitely rescued some people. They have rescued some industry moments, and they have been implementing some amazing things in each of their industries. And so excited that they are here to share their story and be an abolitionist in their own right in so many different ways here tonight. And so we definitely welcome you. The thing that we will be using throughout tonight and to get our mindset together on hearing from these panelists is this journey through Black History Guided Journal. And if some of you have that journal, great. If you don't have that journal, it's okay. But what we'll be doing is hearing quotes from these amazing historians. And these quotes, what we're going to do with them is you'll hear their quotes and then give you time to reflect on them. Like, how does this quote actually go to what it is that you may have in your own life? What are those things that they are saying that may resonate with you or where you are, or maybe where other people are that you know of? And then also after they share that quote, it is thinking about how are you going to interact with it? How are you going to share it? How are you going to rewrite it? Maybe the quote needs to have your name in it. How are you going to apply it to things that you are going through in life? How are you going to reflect it? And then how maybe it's something that someone says that you may either research them, research someone that is in their industry, but the goal is for you to do something with the quote that they are sharing. And with that, we hope that you are going to start to apply it where you're saying, like, what did I learn about that? How am I going to move it forward? And then what is your affirmation that you are going to repeat, say, or constantly do to remind yourself that you also can make history as well? And so use your journal. If you don't have a journal, take out a sheet of paper so that you can actually write down some of these things that these amazing historians are sharing. And our historians tonight, they are Brittney Dias, Ike Nwankwo, and hopefully, Ike, I'm saying it right, Dr. Cheryl Watkins and Dr. Femi Skanes. They are going to share not only their quote, but how do we as individuals who are in this space move from the sidelines to now implementing some ideas. And so I'm so excited that these individuals are here to share that. We'll do some Q&A and also have a breakout session where you'll get an opportunity to hear from these amazing individuals again, and then also think about what are you going to do to make this history-making moment as well. So with that, I am going to turn this over to our first panelist, who is Brittney Dias. And Brittney, if you can unmute, you know what? Before we even go to Brittney, how about all of our panelists that are on this stage, this virtual stage, if you can unmute and say your name, because you'll get an opportunity to share a little bit more, but you can say your name. And also one hope that you have for individuals coming into this space tonight.
Hi, my name's Brittney, and my hope is that you leave feeling empowered and feeling like you have more tools to go out and change the world in the way that you see fit and to amplify your voice.
Hello, my name is Ike. I think Brittney, great minds think alike. I was thinking something similar. I think my one hope is that people feel heard, or not even heard, but listened to, because I think there's a difference between being heard and listened to. People feel listened to and encouraged, and that what they're going through when we have the breakout sessions, people are hearing them and they're seeing what other people have overcome and accomplished and feel inspired to go ahead and take action in their day-to-day lives.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Watkins, and tonight it is my hope that you would work to change that single story mentality that others may have of us by what you yourselves will be able to do and accomplish.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Femi Skanes. My hope for tonight is that those who are with us on the call, or those who are viewing it online or at some point, my hope is that you understand your role in learning our history, and understanding that Black history is more than the month of February, that Black history has undergirded American history, and that too, that we have a responsibility to learn our history and understand how valuable we are in creating history and creating legacies for today and for tomorrow.
Did you all hear that? We got a lot of hopes for tonight. And our hope is that definitely you choose one of them, or even one that you create, and hold fast to that during this time that we have together today. One thing I do want to say before we even get started is the chat is everybody's friend. So if there is something that someone is saying in this space tonight that resonates with you, please drop it in the chat. That definitely encourages our panelists, and it also encourages someone else that is in this space who probably wants to say something, but they didn't have, the unction that you did, and actually to put it out there. So please use the chat as well, and then grab your pen and paper so that we can actually engage with our first panelist who is up here tonight. So our first one that we have is Brittney Dias. So Brittney, please unmute, tell us about yourself, and then I'll share your quote in just a second.
Cool. Hi, my name is Brittney Dias. I'm the author of the Ava and May series and founder of Looking Lens. So Looking Lens creates media for Black and brown children that empowers them to be their best. Only about 11% of children's books have Black characters, and virtually none of those portray girls in business or leadership positions. So that is what the first series to come out of Looking Lens does, Ava and May. There are 2 children's books available for kids 9 and under. I have a background in public health, and so in undergrad, I focused a lot on social determinants of health. And that's where I was able to put a lot of language to things that I had already experienced myself and in what I've seen in the world. And so I was able to see how your location and a lot of what our life outcomes are sometimes not dependent on things that we don't choose it. Right. And so the study of public health says, why don't we work upstream and see what factors are disproportionately affecting certain groups of people, and how can we create strategies to affect whole populations? And so that really informed my strategy with Looking Lens and the series. And my goal is to create stories that people can identify with. And we don't really get our stories told. And when our stories are told, we don't get to be in the writer's room or the pilot seat with that. And so my goal is to create a world where there is more visibility, but there's accurate and empowering visibility.
Oh, so we're about to see how she actually does that in this quote that is up here too. So thank you, Brittney. So if you can just read your quote aloud and tell us what is the meaning behind that quote, and then also what are some backstory behind that quote as well.
Okay, so you owe it to yourself to leave your comfort zone. You owe it to yourself to fail. Success is just a process of failing until you get it right. Yes. So this quote very much resonates with me, and it's something that I'm still learning, that I think is a lifelong process. I think looking at opportunities that have arisen in my life, I look back, excuse me, so sorry. I look back and I think, oh, it's easy to believe the voices or things that have been told to you, or it's easy to internalize that and to have that affect the things that you go for or what you do. And I think that in my life, I've struggled with a lot of imposter syndrome. And what this quote does for me, it reminds me that you will not get towards your goals unless you fail, unless you feel like an imposter, unless you mess up. And perfectionism is really the enemy to your success. And that is something that I'm still learning. But as I've grown as a business owner and an author, and I've reached places where that feel very uncomfortable to me, I've understood that you're most likely doing a lot better than you think. People people probably can't see how uncomfortable you are. And if it wasn't for these steps that you're taking that aren't super solid, you would never be able to run. And so this is really what helps me continue in an environment that can feel pretty precarious. Entrepreneurship isn't the most, there's not always a rule book for what you're doing, which is what makes it very difficult. But in order to change the world, in order to be pioneers, it's necessary to feel this way.
Well, I thank you for bringing up two important things I know that has been like the topic since day one. Well, not day one, but since like 2022 and 2023 around imposter syndrome. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. And one of the things too, I know that you said before, is like representation. So with that representation, and the representation that I'm assuming that you're talking about is for Black and brown individuals, what are some particular struggles that you have seen in individuals, and how does your quote push them to move from that struggle?
Mm-hmm. So do you mean struggle specifically with representation?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, I can speak from personal experience, something very, really specific with the series. So when I created the Ava and May series because I didn't see girls who looked like me celebrated in books and media. They're, like I said, the stats basically say everything you need to know. And so I know that from like a textbook standpoint, but I also know it from a personal standpoint. And so once I published the first book, and I started doing read alouds, I could just see how profound having representation was for Black girls, because whenever I would do an event, the Black girls in the group would be at the very front and they would be so excited. And the main piece of feedback that I got was about hair. And they would be just so excited that they saw little girl characters they were excited about, that were positive, that reflected the hair that they had. And I think that has been the most rewarding thing out of this whole process. Because, all kids like the Ava and May series, and they get excited about, oh, I want to own a lemonade stand now, and I want to do this. And, but it doesn't hit the same as the very, like, the niche target demographic. And you can see that in the events. They are so excited to have that representation. And I think, so I'm from the Pacific Northwest, which there is not a lot of diversity in the Seattle area. And so even going into schools as a Black adult, they don't get to see that either. Like, they don't have Black faculty. They don't see the representation in their education and books, but they also don't see it in a lot of the leadership that they have. And so that has been, it's palpable for sure.
And thank you for sharing that, even sharing like where you are, and then also like the representation and also the emotions that individuals feel when you are sharing that particular work. One of the things that you also have up here is you owe it to yourself to fail. And I keep going back again to the imposter syndrome and trying to be perfect, everything. Can you talk more about the failure aspect and why it's okay to be okay with that too?
Yeah. I think the first thing that came into my mind when you mentioned that part of it is, with imposter syndrome, I think there is this idea that we have to be perfect, especially if you are you know, depending on your identity, if you historically have not been able to make any mistakes, you know, I've had to learn to understand that mistakes are what strengthens you. And I, you know, will never be able to break generational curses or be able to break any sort of glass ceiling if I'm not making mistakes. It's just a natural part of evolution. And so that's where that part of the quote comes from. And I think on a personal note, being raised in an immigrant household, there's kind of this attitude that, you know, you cannot fail. Like that is like the worst thing that can happen. And obviously it comes from a place of survival. But I think that I've had to learn to give myself grace as a person and realize that, you know, the scales aren't even, but that doesn't mean that I can't understand that I am a person and that it is okay to fail and that I am a human being. And so what that really, that part of the quote does for me is really reinstate like my, you know, the way that I treat my own self and question how, in ways that I've internalized a lot of the scrutiny that sometimes we'll experience.
Thank you for sharing that. And people in the audience, if there was something that Brittney said that you were like, yes, you know, I've had those moments. Yes, I have had moments of failure, or I've had moments where I have not seen representation, or I've had moments where I had to move outside of my comfort zone. Can you identify yourself? Like, where are you in this space? And also, are there any questions that you have that you could probably pose to Brittney that is here, who is testifying that she has went through those spaces, still is in it, but she's moving from the sidelines, like what we're saying today, and doing some different things. So I'm going to open up the floor even to our panelists. You know, what are some of those areas that you also see as well?
I think if I can just jump in really quickly, I think when Brittney said there are some moments where she suffers from imposter syndrome, excuse me, imposter syndrome, I bristle when I hear that. And I only bristle when I hear that because I don't want you to fall into what society has identified that would cause you to think that you're not absolutely prepared, absolutely wonderful, absolutely ready, all of that, to walk in the promise that you are carving out as a young entrepreneur. You don't have imposter syndrome. You're not suffering from that. There has not been one moment. You have been successful. You will continue to be successful. There's no need to try to dial it back. You're doing what you have been charged and caused to do, and it doesn't have anything to do with imposter. I said what I said.
Needed that.
Well, it's funny that Dr. Watkins took that lens, and I guess it's funny even in this season that I'm in my life, and I'm really excited that we have an intergenerational conversation happening because I'm still mulling over in my mind the idea of failure for a bunch of reasons. I think. So it's not a rebuttal, but I'm just mulling it over because sometimes I wonder if we take that position of like it's okay to fail almost because are we afraid to succeed? And so that becomes very real when people have, you know, whether it's overtly or, you know, covertly made you believe as a young, you know, it starts from the time that we're young Black girls and growing up, and, you know, and not to dismiss EK, but I'm really coming from the lens of knowing what it is to be a young Black girl growing into a Black woman that makes it almost as if you are successful, you somehow defied the odds. I don't believe that we are successful and we're defying the odds. I believe that we were born to be successful. So failure is part of the journey, but I don't believe that we have to expect that we will fail. I expect that I will succeed, and I'll have some hurdles along the way, if that makes sense. So, but the reason I was laughing about it being intergenerational, because I also think that that comes with maybe the season that you're in your life. So I've had some hurdles, but I haven't necessarily processed them as failures, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've had some hurdles that helped me grow to get to the success point.
Mhm.
Yeah, that sounds kind of similar to what I was going to touch on. What I think one of the things I take away from this is oftentimes when you hear like fail, that seems almost like an endpoint, like getting your grades, you failed that class, it's over, it's the end of the year. But kind of what you can take from this quote here is that's not the end. It's still, you can fail, but you can still overcome that and succeed. And kind of what, like, obstacles, stumbling, but get back up and continue to go forward. So that's one of the things with my quote as well. I think these two directly align. It's just, how do you handle those difficulties and go through it? And that's what I think it's, some fail forward. Exactly. Fail versus fall, keep moving forward. And I think that's one of the good points from this quote here.
Ooh, this is good. And I already see those points that Ike just said in the chat. Like, people can fail forward. You have permission. And then also, like, you're born to succeed. I think we were talking about, failing as well. And then someone else, thank you, Nate, said, I can understand. I have a problem with the word fail at times. Instead of fail, I just say that I haven't achieved it yet. So thank you for saying, I feel like perspective is everything, right? And how it is we perceive things and what we do with it is also going to be the big thing. So one thing I know Brittney just shared, her amazing quote. She shared her experiences. You heard from people in the room. You heard from people in the chat. Now the thing that I'm going to ask that people do, and this is one of the things in the journal, is like, what is going to be the action step? What's going to be the action step? We just heard from 4 panelists, 3 people, in the chat. Now, what are we going to do with this? Like, who do we need to empower? How do we need to empower ourselves? Like, what are we doing with what it was we just heard? And thank you for putting the power of yet. Hey, go ahead, Joyce. You just own it tonight. So like, what are those things that we are going to do with what we just heard? And so I'm going to go back again to the journal. I feel like I need to do this all throughout, and I'm sorry, but what are we going to do? Here are the action steps. Are we going to share what was just shared? Are we going to rewrite it and put our name in her quote? Like, here, I make it personal. Are we going to apply it to some space in our life? Are we going to reflect it? Meaning we are now going to embody what we just heard. We're going to research more on imposter syndrome. We're going to research more on failure. We're going to research on success. Like, what are you going to do with it? And I'm going to give you a moment to just drop that in the chat. What are we going to do with what we just heard?
I definitely feel like within that question, something interesting to consider is, and I wrote this down, how do you internalize this notion of, destined success? How do you internalize that as a concept that can be, or in most good cases is, rooted in community? Asking that question with the intention to build. I'm not going to carry on anymore. That's the question. How do you internalize, destined success as a concept rooted in community? That's what I'm kind of mulling over.
I love that. And I feel like I'm hoping, Vernon, and I thank you for speaking up and speaking in into this conversation. I'm hoping definitely by the end of this night, some more of those answers come to fruition. Because I feel like the panelists, every single panelist has answers in different ways to that particular question. It's always funny how this always works. And every single night is always different, but it always aligns. So keep that there. And if somebody has an answer, please share it, put it in the chat. as well from what Vernon just put into the space, really about the success point. So thank you, Brittney, for sharing your quote. Yes.
I'm sorry, and I know we got to go to EK, but I really just want to say this. Brittney says something that like just took me back to my 6-year-old self, and I just want to tell her thank you so much. So when she talked about the power of seeing yourself in a book, I'm probably about to go downstairs. I still have a lot of my books from childhood, but there was one book in particular. There used to be a Black publishing company in Chicago that published children's books in the late 70s, early 80s. And I want to say it was like Chicago World Press. Long story short, there was a book. It was stick figures.
Third World Press.
Was it Third World Press?
Not a booty.
Yeah. And so there was this story. So I was a little girl who I loved to wear earrings and have my hair done, but I love to play with boys. Like I like to do stuff that boys did, but I just I would like to be cute doing it. So anyway, there was a book, and I cannot remember the name, but it was a story of a little girl who she moved to a new neighborhood and all of the boys thought that she was a boy, until the first day of school, when they said, we'll meet you, and she shows up, her mom made her wear like a dress, like a really like girly outfit. And they were like, what happened to our friend? And she was like, it's me. And all of the boys were like, you're a girl. But I remember the power of that book. I felt affirmed, like it's okay to be a little girl that would do things that little boys did. So I just want to encourage you to keep writing, because 40 years later, I still think about how that book affirmed me and said, it's okay to be the little girl that you are. You don't have to be the little girl that the world says, like you have to be this little girly girl. So keep writing and keep encouraging our girls.
Amen.
Miss Lois, did you have something to add?
Now, I had put in the chat earlier the question, who are we giving the authority to set our standards?
Hmm.
And so, when you're a little kid, yeah, there are standards that your parents set, and that's how we learn and develop. But when is it that we take ownership for our journey? Yeah. And it's a journey, and that journey is going to include some challenges, not failures. You know what I mean? And so you may have to take a step back at what you do. But the thing is, realize that that's part of the process. And you have the authority to set the standards as you move forward in that process and journey.
Oh my, and I see a lot of head nods from what you just shared, Miss Lois, and thank you again for sharing that, because again, what I said before is like, it's all perspective, right? Like every single thing. And so glad that we have representation. We have more questions, and Lois, please like keep that question to the top of your mind during this time together today, because that's always something. Who do we give power to? And who are we doing that to? Yes.
Can I speak on it now, or should we wait for the breakout rooms?
How much time you think?
I'm just thinking, I'll just say
30 seconds.
Say
it.
That's a great thought, because that's something I have to, it spins in my mind as I think about the quote, who is our authority? Who is your authority? And I think that, we can look at identity from like a racial perspective, but also from a gender perspective. For me as a Black woman, I can't separate the two. So I constantly have an intersectional lens when it comes to, my identity as a Black woman. And that being said, thinking about, us as women, us as Black people, I think we have to unlearn, at least in my life, I've had to unlearn the authority that the world tries to give us. I think there's a quote, I don't know who, I'm going to butcher this quote, I don't know what it is, but it says that in every woman, there is a man in her head. And so that goes to show that, we have a lot of these internalized biases, and the world tried to make certain things our authority. And I think, at least in my life, I've had to be really conscious to unlearn certain authority, whether it be any sort of anti-Black authority, whether it be any sort of misogynist authority, making an active effort to understand that my perspective is the most valid one for me, has been life-changing. And that's just what popped into my head when you mentioned, like, who sets the standard, who is the authority, and like who is the blueprint, who writes the rules for you.
Thank you, Brittney.
Tamika, before we go, I just want to say how powerful it is, and Brittney mentioned this earlier. This is an intergenerational platform right now. That's power, and more of this needs to happen in our communities. There is a division that the world would have us not communicate, not connect, and that kind of thing. And so I just want to applaud you that you've got multiple generations here. And we're actually talking to each other.
And thank you so much, Lois, for sharing that. And also individuals who just continue to nod this whole time. And I see that there is definitely a lot of agreement. And if we can create these spaces definitely in our industries, that's definitely a win-win. But not only create the spaces, but do something with what we hear, because we can stay here, we can talk all day, but if nothing happens as a result of it, it was wasted. And like, how can we ensure that we're building those spaces where people can safely share their perspective and agree to disagree,
Absolutely.
or also like apply it. So thank you for sharing that. And I think that's something that I know I'm going to be cognizant of, each time that I do these particular challenges and each time that we interact, and so thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you, Brittney, for elaborating even more, on your quote. And also thank you, Vernon, for sharing that question. So I feel like these things, and Ms. Lois, if you could put that in the chat so we can keep coming back to Brittney, if you could put the other question you had too in the chat, Vernon, you too, if you can put that there, that will be something good for us to continue to mull over during this time that we have together today. So with that, I want to, because it's moving into Ike, and there are some definitely things that he has to say that really like is aligned to what you all are saying too. So Ike, can you share who you are? And then also we'll get into your quote.
All right, so my name is Ike Nwankwo. Some background kind of showing here, it's two things. And my 9-to-5 job is I will do data analytics for Weber, company who makes the grills. And then also in what was formerly known as my free time, run a global nonprofit helping people of all ages, getting them handmade cards and launching a scholarship and portable entertainment systems. Pretty much just finding a lot of people who are overlooked and may not get as much love and attention, and making sure that they're getting some of the encouragement that they need. I think it was at the post office that we connected, right, Tamika? I think that's where. So at the post office all the time, shipping these cards and making sure that people across the globe are getting that kind of inspiration throughout. That's my summary. Then I'll go with this. So I'm a kind of person with always use little rhymes and all that kind of stuff. It makes it a little bit easier for me to remember. But my quote is, one can use a difficult situation as insulation or inspiration. And where this really came about is, for background, is this is actually coming up, my 20-year anniversary of my first trip to the ER. And 2005 is when I had brain surgery. And kind of how I look at it is, with that brain surgery or any kind of situation, one could look at it, I could look at it and say, oh, I'm not going to graduate college, because I had my brain surgery right when I was accepted into the business school. So it just started into my junior year. And I could look and say, I'm going to fail out of this because of I had brain surgery on the part of my brain that controls short-term memory. So I could say like insulation or an excuse. So like, don't blame me, blame the surgeon, blame my circumstances. This is extremely tough. Like I'm going back to school a month after getting the part of my brain that controls short-term memory removed. It's not my fault. Like look at my circumstances, look at my situation, and kind of putting that barrier in. But instead, kind of what I put together with this quote is the doctors were telling me no, I couldn't do it. The school was questioning me if it was possible. So I just kind of use that always as inspiration. Like you say I can't, let me work harder and overcome that and use that as my inspiration to work. And that's something that I've seen both in school and in the workplace. Different things, people saying this can't be done, this is not possible, and just kind of working to find out ways to use what was once lesson enchanting and kind of using that as my inspiration moving forward.
Ike, one, I thank you for sharing your story. And I thank you also for being honest with like one, this is not an easy task, but it's something that you are choosing. And I know one thing that I put with your quote, especially because it was posted today, was to be mindful of the decisions that we make. And so one thing that you just shared is each thing has a choice. It's either what you see on this slide is either insulation or it's inspiration. And so if there is somebody who is struggling with both of those, because this is about, moving from the sidelines and implementing ideas, right? What is one thing that you will say or you could say to them if they are struggling with these 2 points? What would you say to get them to make a decision around either of the two?
If I would say, if they're looking like moving from if someone is thinking about their situation, no matter what it is, and just kind of focusing on that and not really taking that step forward, and it's like, okay, well, the outcome. No, that's not going to be success. It's not going to be what you're really shooting for, what your goals are, what you could achieve and accomplish. But if it is actually trying, working like what you're actually capable of, then you have so much more potential, the things that you could achieve. And it's first, what's most important is belief, like believing in yourself, understanding like I can overcome this. So what the big thing for me was, for years, I would tell them my stories. Like for years, I was so embarrassed. Like I wouldn't, there's no way I would do this being recorded and say like I have epilepsy. I was like, I'd be in tears, shaking, like so worried about it. But now what I can say is, I have epilepsy. Epilepsy no longer has me. I'm in control. And I would say the same thing with other individuals. Like you're going through a difficult situation, make sure you know that you're in control. You can overcome that and conquer it, and then share your story and use that to inspire others to overcome that. This is just step one.
I'm speechless. That's one, because one, I feel like you're in everyone's head about you have to make a choice and this is time for you to share it. And I think going back to even Lois's, thing before too, is around who has the authority. And what I'm hearing from you is we do, right? Like all of us do, and we can take ownership of that. And so I know Ike, like he shared his story so succinctly. There's so much behind it that I know he didn't even go into. And like sometimes we can share our stories and it could just be very short, and it always leaves you asking for, man, how did they arrive there? Like how did they get there to say it just like that? And so Ike, I'm going to ask you that question, because you could go all around the world, right, to say like these are the things that brought me to here. But how did you choose to do it that way? Because there's power in both.
Yeah. So I think it was a lot of practice. So, this cute little rhyming quote that wasn't like, all in the beginning. And I have another one where it's like, I'm a huge into football. So I have another quote like, why worry about losing in the second quarter when you'll win the game? Something where it's like, things are difficult now, but I have faith. I know how things are going to end out. So keep working on it. So it's something where there were lots of situations where it was, had one job, one time was my dream job that I've been praying about and did all kinds of stuff. And then they ended up firing me on my birthday after I brought them a doctor's note saying that I had a setback in my health, in my medical conditions. And then they fired me. And, and it was something where that was the ultimate low point that I had gone through. But it was something where it was like, instead of sitting in that situation, thinking about that was kind of, what more can I do? I know I've overcome a lot. I can do more. Let me keep focusing. Let me keep trying. Let me stay hopeful and let me keep working through it. And another thing for me was also at the same time, volunteering, giving back, like using that time that I had away from my job, volunteering at the hospital. And it's the kind of thing where I was having epilepsy, having seizures, but then seeing some little kid. So number one story is this little girl who had a seizure in my arms and then popped up and was like, all done, and like pulled my hand to go paint a picture. And it's like, wow. So I'm having these little like auras of pre-seizures, and this little girl is having a grand mal seizure and is able to overcome it like that and get past it. So put it in perspective, like 6'4" man and a little like little girl doing it. So it's the kind of thing where it's like, I see other people, other ages who can do it, like kind of let me keep going, let me keep fighting. So now it's the point where, all in perspective, where I have a better job, where I actually hired, I'm in charge of the company who was responsible for firing me on my birthday based on my epilepsy. I'm in control of, whether or not they get paid and how we use them. They have to report to me. So it's the kind of thing where it's, no need to worry about the second quarter because I've moved past that and make sure I stay faithful and thankful.
Man, if there was something that Ike said that resonated with you, if there was some love you want to just put on your screen with these reactions from what he shared, please do that now. If there is someone that has something you just want to say to Ike or something about this quote, please unmute, because I'm going to be quiet. Like, give somebody else an opportunity. Come on, Cheryl. Dr. Cheryl.
Tell you, listen, we've been in the chat, so you need to catch up. I know you've been moderating and hosting, but go on and catch up with that chat. But I want you to look at Ike. I want you to look at what Femi wrote, because I almost hollered over here. Femi took what you said and just asked a question. I wonder how we would be in life if we got up at the end of a tough season in our lives and we pop up and say, all done. So now let me tell you something. That thing, now I'm past the now, Femi. That thing will sure enough preach itself. What if we got up and said, all done, wiped our hands of it, all done, got up with a new attitude, with a new perspective. Oh, Ike, that thing speaks to my heart. You just pierced it. And Femi came back and double pierced it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Love it.
I love that little girl. I think at the time she was like 3 years old, but now she's grown. But seeing her on like that's will forever be known. I'll see, like, anytime I see anything all done, I wrote blog posts about her. That's a touching point, and it puts everything. That's the thing, everything in perspective.
Yes.
What can't we handle? What can't we do? Like, yes, all in perspective.
Yes, Lois, I see you.
All I'm thinking right now is we've got to learn to always press towards the mark and that high calling, as opposed to, because when you say all done, that means I'm not going to dredge up the stuff from the past over and over again. I'm not. There are lessons that I learned that I need to take forward with me. but too often we get stuck. Just like the DK, just like he said, I mean, he could have taken that being fired and gone down, a rabbit hole that would not have put him where he is now. And I'm going to share this. Okay, so I'm going to be 74 next month. So I'm going to go back to your quote. I know as I turned 74 and I read your quote that I sometimes use my age as not inspiration, but installation. And I'm not going to do that no more. Yeah.
This is good. Thank you so much, Lois. And I put down like you are doing both things in the action steps. You're reflecting and then you're applying it based on his story. And I thank you. And then also even today, as we're in this space, think about like what your narrative or what your quote will be. Because it took some individuals in this panel to come up with their quote very quickly. And it took some, a very long time to come up with how are they going to summarize how they are going to make this bold first move. So just keep thinking about what will your narrative be? What will your quote be? And for Lois, it may be, around a piece of what, Ike said, it may be a part of what Brittney said, it may be something else, but think about how are you going to make this history? How are you going to make this history-making moment? And how are you going to apply, again, what was also shared as well? So thank you so much, Lois. I'm going to bring up, because I'm looking at our time, and I want to be cognizant of that, too. Our next quote is actually from our journal. So our Journey Through Black History, and it's found on page 18 and 19. So if you have this book, open it up, because you're about to hear from Dr. Cheryl Watkins, who is going to share her quote as well. So Dr. Watkins, you already spoke, but speak again. Who are you? And then I'll put up your quote as well.
You all just don't know. This is so wonderful. Listen, I am Cheryl Watkins. I am an educator. I am a lifelong educator. I love learning. I love sharing what I've learned. But more than anything and all of that, I am the daughter of Henry and Jean Watkins. I'm the sister to Barbara, Donna, and Antoinette. I am the aunt to Kiyomi, to Reginald, and to Tyler. I'm the great aunt to DJ, Darnell Jr., and Alyssa. I call out those names and can definitely go further back because that's who I am. That's how I've been shaped. And so not just in February am I reminded of this, but I'm reminded of it 365 days of the year. And I believe that because I am who I say I am, that I owe all of these entities. I owe my mama and my daddy. I owe my sisters. I owe my nieces and my nephews. I owe them. Now, let me move to my quote because it's already up there and it comes from my father. My dad and I were talking in the car driving one day, and we were having a conversation about a well-known pastor. And my father said, he talks too much. And I said, well, Poppy, he's just saying what needs to be said. And he said, just because it needs to be said, don't mean it need to be said by you. Pause for a second. I thought about that and I'm like, oh, okay, Daddy, you know what you're talking about, right? The Bible tells us, don't worry about what you put in your mouth. Lots of people are concerned about what they eat. And, oh no, in Leviticus, it says you can't have anything that crawls. Okay, I get it. I get it. In the New Testament, it tells us very clearly, don't worry about what you put in your mouth, but worry about what comes out of your mouth. And so I charge that to be just what my father was saying. We all have thoughts and opinions. We all have some wisdom that we've gained through our experiences. It just doesn't mean that we need to share everything that we've experienced, share every piece of knowledge that we have. And I'm gonna attach that to this thought of a butterfly, of being a butterfly. So my business is Monarch Education Consultants, Monarch specifically and deliberately chosen, because that butterfly is a symbol of new life, a symbol of transformation. And so when you embrace this quote that my dad gave to me oh so many years ago, when you embrace it, you are embracing a new opportunity for yourself. You're maturing because you understand it. And so as you go through life and as you switch from that caterpillar nestled within that cocoon or that chrysalis, and you emerge a butterfly, that means you've had to go through some things to get to where you are. So you've been nestled in that cocoon. We've been sheltered, but now we've gone through some things to get to where we are right now. It's that maturity that definitely matters. And so the last thing I'll say about butterflies is I'll give you just a quick little lesson. Chaos theory says the flap of a single butterfly's wing has the possibility to make a ripple effect. And that ripple effect is felt for miles and miles and miles. The flap of a single butterfly's wing, that's chaos theory. And so as you mature, as you lean into a quote like this one, you're now making an impact. You're making a stronger impact on society. You're actually making a stronger impact on yourself.
Dr. Cheryl, you always cause people to think even more. And you, like Ike, do it so succinctly, like every single time. So, Dr. Cheryl, you said something, because you said a lot of things. And sometimes I think, and I'm so glad that we do have an intergenerational group again, because sometimes we always want to speak up, but it may not be the time to speak up. And so for you, and this is just you only, but how do you know when it's time to be quiet and when it's time to speak?
Yeah. So I can only tell you the way I know it and the way I experience it. The Bible says, don't cast your pearls at the feet of swine, because if you do, they're going to turn around and trample you and maul you like a dog. So not everyone is worthy of the things that you have to say. So you be careful when you say them and who you give it to. Sometimes people look for opportunities to vilify you, to, demean you, to do all of those things. You don't have to give them that. And just because you want to speak up and say something doesn't mean you have to. You just close your mouth and you let them just hang right where they are. And then, you just let them hang where they are. You don't have to say it. You don't have to say it.
Woo, if you all heard a word through Dr. Cheryl, please put it in the chat. Please use your reactions. I saw Michaela. She had her hand claps going this whole time while you were talking, Dr. Cheryl. Okay. But what are some things that you all heard? What are some reactions? Please put those things in the chat, because there were so many things that were shared and so many closed mouths, and also open mouths as she was talking as well. Yes, Femi. Yep.
Dr. Cheryl said one thing that really, the word just keeps spinning in my head, and she used the word maturity. And so when you ask the question of, like, how do you know when it's time to talk and time not to talk? I think that maturity just can answer that question, right? It's almost so abstract that there's not a concrete right or wrong. And I'll give just a very quick example, and I may actually do it as soon as we get off the call. But there's a space that I am connected to professionally, that there are just some racist practices and microaggressions that are happening. Anybody who knows me knows that sometimes I'm working on, just because it needs to be said doesn't mean it needs to be said by you. So typically I would challenge it, but maturity says they're not the group to challenge it with. So it's not that I don't have the skills. It's just that they are not worthy of my time and my intellect. So I'm choosing not to, because maturity tells me that it wouldn't matter what I said, that they are not positioned to accept the truth and to respond to it. And so I think that's the only answer that I can give. And Cheryl already said it. It's just maturity.
Love it.
Ooh, yes. Yes. Yes, Vernon, come on in the room.
Who it was that dropped in the chat? That's wisdom. Yeah, Lois. So kind of what I was interpreting, you know, and I had a question that Femi, you answered really well, which is like, how do you adapt to these situations where there is some operating power dynamic? You feel me? Where no matter what sort of rationale you possess, what sort of wisdom or maturity you possess, you know, someone is going to deem themselves in power over you. And so, you know, the note about just not picking your battles, essentially. And there's a lesson about protecting your peace in that as well. But picking your battles, not from the perspective of I am therefore the inferior in this situation, like I'm being perceived by this operating power dynamic, but rather, you know, I'm smarter than that. And so that was really powerful. I appreciated that note. Because that's the question that I had, is like, what about the power dynamics? What about the moments where you are inferior, you don't have the wisdom, you don't get to say this, you don't get to do that. And it happens in power dynamics related to gender, race, age, you feel me, sexuality. I mean, all of our binaries, all of our systems, this plays out, this power dynamic plays out. And so I appreciated you kind of shedding light on that, because I had a philosophical question about it that you answered.
So that's a good point. But I think with this, kind of touching back to my story, how the two of these connect, like it was, you know, they were getting on me, and, you know, where some of my boss coworkers were being real rude, and I was like, at that point in time, was currently on some medical, I had a medical low point, because I wasn't sure if I was going to need to get brain surgery all over again. And I was really cautious about my health, and that was really pulling me down. But I was completing all my stuff at work, and I told them, like, gave them the note, and then I gave them the note, they came back at me aggressively, and they let me go. Like, they came back at me aggressively, and I didn't say anything. I didn't like stick up for myself and say, like, I'm completing all the work that I'm supposed to be doing. And then I didn't say anything, and then I got let go. What their response was like, oh, we'll let you work for the remaining month, teach everyone what you were doing, because no one else knows how to do it. Then we'll let you say you worked the next day so you can have health insurance for the following month, because we know you need health insurance. You know, but it's something where it's like, how do you know when something like should be said? I mean, thankfully right now I'm happy things are better, but in those kinds of situations, like, when do you know something should be said, or, you know, etc.
But see, sometimes I think you have to let someone else do the talking for you. And when you describe that situation, I immediately in my head said, I smell a lawsuit. And so you go and you seek someone else to do that talking for you. So just because it needs to be said, don't mean it need to be said by you, but it can definitely be said by someone else. All right, now we can talk. I'm gonna put my hand on my hip in a minute and stomp my foot. So sometimes somebody else can say it for you. So you turn it over to Big Mama, you turn it over to Mud Dear, you turn it over to your teacher, you turn it over to your principal, you turn it over to someone else and let them say it for you. Now you can be somewhere, whispering in their ear, now, here, say this part, because this is what they did to me. Say it. Just go ahead and say it. So you can do that. It just doesn't have to be said by you. It can be said by somebody else.
And my response, also, I'm sorry, Ike, to that is, if I had to definitively say, when do you know that it's time to speak up? Is when your voice would actually make a difference in the outcome. And so that goes to that discernment, and that goes to being able to assess a situation. If your voice could actually make a difference, if you have evidence along the way that it makes a difference, then you absolutely should speak up. But there are some environments that the evidence and the history has shown you that even speaking up wouldn't make a difference. Then I would say that the answer is no. But I have to also agree with Cheryl, and it comes full circle. That is why we also need community. Because when you're in community, then somebody can speak up for you. I can tell you that there have been times that, Cheryl and I know each other in many ways, actually, but there have been times when I know that Cheryl has spoken up for me, and there have actually been times when I've spoken up for Cheryl. And yet neither one of us, if you haven't figured out, will shy away from speaking, but it may not have just been the right time for us to speak in that moment. So I think that to sum it up is speak when it's going to make a difference.
And I see your hand raised too. I don't want to mispronounce your name.
It's Aisa too.
Aisa too. Good to see you here.
You too. I also think that you have to weigh what's important to you. Even though you were done wrong, what they offered you was I think another day so that you could have health insurance. That to me was important to you back then. And so I think sometimes you have to weigh what's important to you. I kind of feel that you still feel the indignance of it, but the thing is that you got your health insurance, which back then was probably more important than making a stand. I'm thought to, like, when you're in college and you know that a professor or something is wrong, you can't be an activist and try to get a degree from that same place. You have to be in a position of empowerment. That's it.
Ooh, I'm telling. So this conversation, this is not going to end here tonight. It's not. It's too much. It's too much wrapped up into every single thing was shared. And I'm going to go back again to what we said in the initial part. What's going to be our role in it? So it can't just stay here. We got people from all sides sharing some important points, but it's like, what are we going to do with it in the space that we're in? And then also what I did here too is power in advocacy as well. And so we can definitely use our voice to share it, but also if there's someone who's advocating, sometimes it's great to be in numbers, right? Like if there are more people saying the thing, that makes it even stronger. So here we all have this big community, and it's going even bigger because we have other people who are around that may, if we talk long enough, we're going to see a whole bunch of connections. So like, what are the things that we're going to do with what was just heard from so many people? And how are we going to do it in our industry? That's the big thing. And I want us to definitely talk about it. And that's going to come up. I'm going to move next to Femi because Femi, I'm saying it wrong. It is your turn. And I'm going to put up your quote too.
So, good evening again, everybody. I'm Dr. Femi Skanes. I am the founder and CEO, lead consultant at Leadership Edge LLC. EDGE is actually an acronym for Educational Design Generating Excellence, and that's what I spend. That's what I spend my days doing, helping organizations, whether it's schools, nonprofits, anybody that's trying to make a mark in the educational space. I help them reach their excellence goals. And for different organizations, the excellence goals may look different in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. My quote, and very much like Cheryl, I am a lifelong educator. And when I say lifelong, I probably was 11 years old when my great uncle, who was my pastor at the time, told me that my gift was teaching. And while I didn't understand it at the time, I definitely understand it now. So, it is my profession, but it's actually the calling on my life. My quote is, wise people understand that letting go is an important part of a healthy life cycle. Let me say that again. Wise people understand that letting go is an important part of a healthy life cycle. In a world now where we want to amass everything, we want to amass money and status and social capital and things and clothes and that's what we're taught, but we're often not taught how to also get rid of things, how to let things go, how to make space. And so it actually takes me back to when my kids were toddlers, and they had a playroom, which was just a room full of toys and junk, in my opinion. But it was the space that I would send them to go play. And every year, at the beginning of really at the end of November, the beginning of December, I would have them go into that playroom, and they had to go take out good toys, not junk, good toys that they weren't using anymore, because I taught them that you have to donate before you can receive. And this is something that we did from the time that they were young. And my kids have such a giving spirit now, but I often reflect that they have a giving spirit because they were taught to have a giving spirit. But we don't think about letting go of some things to gain the next thing. And so that's important in my part of the story, because I held a position, a very notable position. And yet when God told me that it was time to let it go, there were so many people that were saying like, and I even even within myself, I'm like, now you're gonna lead, girl, you're gonna lead this good job. But I understood that I had to let that go to get to where I am now. I would have never been able to fully run my company. I would not have been able to go out and have an impact on so many different schools. And I work with nonprofits and just different organizations had I held on to the one job that I had. So I had to let that go to be able to get to the next thing. And so for me, everything really goes back to, how do we teach kids that? How do we teach them when it's time to let something go? What things do you need to let go of? Because they are wrestling in a world that tells them get more, gain more, earn more, do more. But they don't live in a world that says, and now it's time to let some things go.
And I'm telling you, I there's no sponsorship here because my company is called Let Go Dash Be Great. And when I saw Femi's quote, I said, oh my goodness, here's someone who has also experienced a lot of similar journeys, and now sharing that this is beyond her, right? She testified to the pushing to move, but now also thinking about how can we do that for the people who we serve. And so in Femi's case, and that for a lot of our cases, I know Dr. Cheryl's, mine, just about a lot of people on here in the education industry, and how we're going to do that for our youth. So Femi, what is one thing that you would say that you are seeing that youth may need to let go of? And what would be that remedy that you give in terms of like how to release it?
So one thing, it actually goes back to the example that I just gave. One thing that I'm learning to let go of is lifting my voice in every space. Um, I just have hit a point in life now that I'm very confident that I have the intellect, I have the skill to be able to speak into a space, but yet I don't have to. That's part of a healthy life cycle. Letting sometimes my mother would get mad. She's like, "You always have to have the last word," and then I would say, "Yep," and she would say, "You see what I mean?" Right? And so just learning that I don't always have to lift my voice to get my point across. That doesn't mean that there aren't ways to get my point across. So that's the letting go of it. I would say that that's probably the one thing, but I keep going back to it. It's just so important to me that I'm always thinking about, and the young people that, I still have a group of students that I mentor. What does that look like for me to help them develop? What does that look like for me to say, okay, what is it that you need to let go of? Whether it's friendships, whether it is self-doubt, what is that thing that you have to let go of? Because when we don't let go of it, the very thing that we think is an asset can easily become baggage.
Man, you have said a word, a word, a word. If there was something that Femi said that resonated with you, please drop it in the chat. Drop it in the chat. Send the reactions. Yes, Femi.
I want to go back to something. I wrote this down because I didn't want to forget it. It was something that Ike said. He said they kept him on so that he pretty much could teach them how to do his job. One of the best pieces of advice that I got when I was young, when I got my position, I was young, a young Black female. People questioned if I would be able to do the job. I had an employee who actually lived in the neighborhood. He had an old grandmother. She was not very formally educated, but she was wise. And she also, when it came to boundaries, when it was me, she didn't respect any. If she had something to say to me, she was like, "Let me in. I will say it." And no matter what she had to say, I would always listen. But I remember, and I think that this is so important in Black History Month. She came in my office one day and she told me, she looked at me in my eyes. She said, "You're young and you're smart. Don't teach these white people everything that you know." I never let that go. I don't know what it was about the intonation, about the wisdom. And that doesn't mean that I didn't develop people, but I understood what she was saying because that's understanding history. And that's what I think that this conversation is about. How often have we seen that we are the creators, the curators, the pioneers of so many amazing things, and then we turn around and somebody steals our intellectual property? And so I was thinking about the importance in Black History Month of our intellectual property and how valuable it is. And so here's what I would have as a piece of advice when it comes to that. And this all really comes from that one thing that Ike said. When it comes to our intellectual property, we have to develop it, we have to value it, and we have to protect it.
Now that's something that we could put down from every single person in here. Like we need to drop that all in the chat. Like I will develop it, I will protect it. And what's the last thing you said?
I'll develop it, I'll value it, and I'll protect it.
I will develop it, I will value it, and I will protect it. So if that is one affirmation that we need to constantly say, constantly tell our youth, constantly tell our family in terms of our IP, and also our BIG, meaning our big goals, our intellect, and all of our great gifts that we have. If we can do that, then we are definitely making some history and making some history moments. And with that, I want to say, and I'm looking at our time, I'm like, oh no, this is not good. But one, I want to open it up to our audience because there were a lot of things that were shared. And so there may be some things that you want to repeat that you want to say and that you want to do as a result of what was heard here tonight, because it was so many nuggets. We want you to share it. There may be a question or an answer, because I know I told people to put those questions in the chat that you're thinking about. There may be a question and an answer to that question that you already thought about throughout our time together tonight. If you could put that in the chat, please do that. And while you are doing that, I'm going to move to this next slide because I want to share that. And then we're going to move, I guess, we have to. I just feel like it's in my spirit. We need to move into breakouts because some of you need to be connected to each other. I just feel that. But one of the things up here is to definitely know that when we come back next week, this is the week where we are putting some of these quotes in motion. So you'll hear from one other historian, but all of our panelists, the majority of them are going to come back on the 22nd. And you as the attendee, you're going to be the ones that's going to be driving a lot of the conversation, because we want to hear, what are you going to do? What are you going to do in your community? What is a quote that is going to be riddled with your name in it? And sometimes it doesn't have to be somebody famous that's having this quote. I created this because I wanted people to know that you have quote making abilities too. So what is going to be your quote? What is going to be that thing that you're going to do in order to make some bold first moves, to do, as all of our panelists shared, do some implementation and move from the sidelines of keeping your mouth closed or keeping it open or moving into the success moment, all of that. We have to hear that voice. Our students need it. We deserve it. And that is huge. So if there's a way for you to share that, please do. And then also what I have up here is the feedback. So please provide feedback to this experience. We heard a lot of things already from a lot of the people in this space in terms of this is an intergenerational moment. If that's something that you saw that's of value, put it there and just add that particular feedback, or what are you going to do as a result of this time together? And then the other is this journal, which we've been talking about. It is found on our website and also on Amazon. It's 30% off this week, and Amazon is having it on sale too. So please find it and use it as a way to reflect on your journey as you do exactly what Dr. Cheryl said. Like right now we're in the sapling, the sapling in the chrysalis phase to get to either this butterfly or this tree. And next week is all going to be tree moments. It's all going to be butterfly moments, because there's going to be some things that we got to put out here for other people to hear and to see and to do. Okay. So with that, definitely want to read some of these particular quotes that are out here. Or if there's someone who wants to unmute and share, and I saw someone sent me a message that says, Tamiko, it's okay if it's no breakout. So that is fine too. But if there's anyone who wants to unmute and just share, like, what is the thing that you got out of this experience tonight? And we can all hear that as well. Anybody want to unmute and share? Yes.
Start off real quick. So I mentioned, I just thought this was so a little bit like meant to be, I can say. So in there at the post office, shipping some cards, and it just so happens that we run into each other. And this whole thing's about a journal. And this here is the first journal that I kept, that I started keeping. And the reason, I mentioned it with my brain surgery, but the doctors and some of my family friends said, with the surgery, I may not remember anything. And I needed to keep a journal and start having everything on track. So that's something that I've been doing since, 20-year anniversary. I've been keeping a journal and keeping track of this. And so I think that's randomly running into you at the post office, and then now hearing about Black history, all about keeping a journal, and then had to go find my first ever journal, reading through some of those things. So I think how this all comes together is very touching. This is step one for everyone.
And Tamiko, I don't know if I told you, but I'm also the author of a journal. So it is definitely a full circle moment.
This is good. And we have another author on here too. So I know, Ava and May series, I don't know where she went, but yes, like this is so good that everyone is writing things down. And I know that with these journal experiences, like This is the opportunity to go back and look at what you wrote before, right? And see if those things changed. And then even those moments, and I'm so glad a lot of you shared those, even those moments that are really hard, those moments need to be documented too. Because like when we come back to it, we're like, oh my goodness, look at how far I've grown. Or look at how far that my journey, regardless of what it is, has really helped somebody else because I shared it. And so I am so grateful. And I don't want to be the only one talking. So if there's somebody else that has something to say, please share, but I can keep going.
I just want to say I appreciate, you know, all the panelists coming out tonight. I really feel like, you know, there's such a inspiration. You could call it whatever you want, an inspiration, a power, a beauty in, you know, sharing perspectives as a means of, you know, not really, you know, arguing or debating, you know, or seeking some notion of, you know, objective truth. We're not out here to do that. We're sharing perspectives as a means of educating each other, understanding each other, and building something from that, you know. And this is me talking, so I can't be listening while I'm talking. But so many lessons and so much wisdom and insight shared about the power of listening and learning. You know, that's something that me in my youth, I'm young, I got the energy, I love to talk, I love to, step out, I'm gonna say something, you know, it don't matter what space I'm in, it don't matter who in front of me. They say something out of pocket, I'm gonna address it. If I'm feeling, you know, some kind of way, I'm gonna address it, you know. But I recognize that that's got me in a lot of situations where I find myself not having been, you know, as effective in addressing the situation as I could have been if I would have took a step back and really, you know, thought it out or addressed myself first. You know, how am I doing? Why am I thinking the way I'm thinking? How do I feel? Stuff like that. There's such a beauty and power in being able to do that. So thank you. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Vernon. And again, and if there are book links, all of that stuff, please share it. Please share it. Please share it. Please share it. Share it with me too, because I'm going to send out a follow-up email after this as well, so that the individuals in this space can also get those too. And we hope that this was definitely helpful tonight. We hope that one thing that we all do is move into action. So who do you need to tell one of these quotes or one of these next steps to? Because once you do, then it becomes really real. Then it becomes like we're just not keeping it here. We are actually going to do something with it. And our community, especially our Black community, needs to hear that voice like soon. Soon. Because we got people in it who need to make some movements, some very bold first moves, and they're afraid to do it. And the fact that all of you are here tonight sharing what it is you would do or could do or shall do or will do is definitely the first step. And I'm telling you, Femi, Dr. Femi, Dr. Cheryl, Ike, and Brittney, they done already made step 2 and 3 or 5 and 6 and 10. And that means that we all can too. And so with that, I hope you all have a great night. I hope that this is part of this journey and that you're ready to do it. And I definitely hope that a lot of you are back next week. So please share it with somebody else. Please tell somebody else. And please start working on your history making moment, because somebody's waiting on you to do it. And with that, anybody else have any final words?
I just love that you've convened this group and that you've done this. It's really so impactful. Thank you so much for giving of your time, your treasure, your talent to advance this message, these messages. It's going to have an impact that I don't think you understand it's going to have. So
Absolutely.
thank you so very much for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Ditto.
I'm looking at, look at that. You had a long, hard day, but this ended your evening on a positive note. I love that, Femi. Yes.
Yay. Well, have a good night, you all. Thank you so much again. See you all next week.
Good night.
Bye. Oh, I forgot to take a picture. It's okay. It's okay. Panelists.
I'm
Take a
saying,
screenshot.
take the picture.
Yes. Okay. Let's do. We'll take a picture.
Put your first slide up
Oh, yes. Look at you.
and
Okay,
then
let's
take a
see.
screenshot.
And I'm trying to see, I cannot see, and maybe you all can. So if someone on your side can do that, because all I see is you all. I don't see this screen,
If
but
you
I will
stop-
take it.
If you stop your share.
But she was saying just put the first slide up.
Okay,
So then
so
you won't be able
I'll take this one and send it
Okay.
to you, and then you can take one. Okay.
All right. Tell us when.
Oh, go. Okay, but wait, let me get one more. One more so I can get Brittney. Okay. Okay.
Yay. Okay, now you want me to take mine? All right, we ready? 1, 2, 3. Hold on. Keep your face. Keep your face. All right. Thank you all so much. I'll send all the pictures out too. Have a great night on purpose. Take care. Nate, good to see you. Michaela. Yeah. And Nate, thank you for coming back. Ike, thank you too.
It was great. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I so hope this was so super helpful. All of that. I'm so glad